Hello, everyone. Today we're talking about the connection between eggs and heart disease. There is a popular belief that cholesterol and saturated fats are bad for us. This assumption is based on the idea that saturated fats increase cholesterol, and high cholesterol levels cause heart disease. This view has been presented to us so often that we hardly question it anymore. The basis for this assumption is the so-called 7-country study from the late 1950s and early 1960s. Nutritionist Ansel Keys conducted this study and linked diets high in saturated fats and cholesterol to increased rates of heart disease. However, his study was based on only 7 selected countries, although data from 22 countries was originally available. The countries were selected so that they supported his hypothesis. Since this study, hundreds of other studies have been conducted, some confirming Keys' views and others contradicting them. Some studies show a strong correlation between high cholesterol levels and cardiovascular disease, while other studies find no correlation or even an inverse correlation. The question is, why is it so difficult to find a clear answer? One reason could be who finances the studies. Large, well-designed studies are expensive and often funded by pharmaceutical companies that have an interest in proving that high cholesterol causes heart disease. It is noteworthy that studies with positive results have about 85% chance of being published, while studies with negative results only have about 12.5% chance of being published. This tendency is evident even in scientific studies based on double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. An increased bias in favor of positive results may also occur if the study was commissioned by a specific person or institution. In fact, about 85% of published manuscripts contain only positive results, indicating a dominant bias toward publishing positive findings. Previous studies in the field of pediatric ophthalmology also confirm this tendency. Here, studies with positive results had a higher probability of being published in journals with a high impact factor than studies with negative results. This discrepancy highlights the challenges researchers face in disseminating negative results. The existing preference for positive results in scientific publications is an important aspect to take into account. Large studies with thousands of participants can reveal trends. Let's say 55% of the 10,000 study participants react in a certain way. This trend is likely to be statistically significant, but it is important to remember that 4,500 of the 10,000 participants could have reacted differently. Regardless of the size of the study, the result for us could be different. To understand how your body works, you need to know the mechanisms and basic physiology. This allows you to analyze your own blood tests or results. For example, you can look at your feelings, weight, and waistline to learn more about yourself. Now let's look at some basic facts. Eggs contain cholesterol and saturated fats. But does eating lots of eggs mean we increase our blood cholesterol? The answer is not always clear. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And if it rises, is that bad? Many people believe that an increase in cholesterol levels is bad, but that is not necessarily the case. We need to look at the bigger picture. Based on conventional wisdom about eggs, cholesterol, saturated fats, and heart disease, we believe that dietary cholesterol leads to plaques and atherosclerosis. But perhaps there is a transformation process. Maybe the cholesterol in the plaque doesn't come directly from the eggs. Let's consider another example. A cow has a body full of fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. This cow produces milk from which we can make butter, which is high in fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. But where does the cholesterol in cows come from? Did the cow eat a lot of eggs with cholesterol? Did she eat a lot of butter with cholesterol? Did she eat a lot of meat? No. If the cow eats what she is supposed to, then she only eats grass that does not contain cholesterol. And yet she ends up with all that cholesterol in the body. This conversion process is also known as metabolism. We eat certain foods and along the way they become something else. When we get energy from protein, carbohydrates, or fat, it is because we can convert it into acetyl coenzyme A. This is an intermediate metabolite that we use for energy. But if we consume very little carbohydrate, this acetyl coenzyme A can be converted into something else depending on the circumstances. The main nutrients we consume are proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Proteins are converted into tissue and serve as building blocks for our body parts. Excess protein can be converted into carbohydrates or fat. It is important to note that this process is not reversible ease. All three nutrients are converted into acetyl coenzyme A. This is an intermediate product that we use to generate energy. When we have a low carbohydrate diet, acetyl coenzyme A can be converted into ketones. Acetyl coenzyme A is also the starting substance for cholesterol production. This means that the cholesterol in our bodies doesn't necessarily come from the food we eat. We can convert everything we eat into cholesterol when our body needs it. Today, we know that chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance are the main causes of cardiovascular disease. These three conditions are the main features of metabolic syndrome or syndrome before. The question now is whether eating eggs causes these three conditions and therefore promotes cardiovascular disease. The answer is no. Eggs do not contain anything that causes insulin resistance, oxidative stress, or inflammation unless you are allergic to them. Many observational studies, such as the 7-country studies, have shown that countries with high intakes of saturated fats and cholesterol also have a high prevalence of cardiovascular disease. But these studies don't take into account what else people eat or do. They do not take into account the consumption of sugar, margarine and chemicals, smoking behavior, or lack of exercise. A large study from Korea with more than 12 million participants showed that low total cholesterol levels are not necessarily associated with lower mortality. In fact, it can be harmful to your health if certain cholesterol components are too low. It is a common misconception that low cholesterol is generally better. In fact, research suggests that the optimal cholesterol level, which is associated with the lowest mortality rate, may be higher than commonly believed. Research shows that the risk of death is very low over a broad range of 180 to 346 milligrams per deciliter, with the optimal level being around 230 milligrams per deciliter. Although a global limit of 200 milligrams per deciliter is often considered high, and the recommendation is to take medication to control it, the optimal range identified by the study largely corresponds to this threshold. Interestingly, this optimal range falls almost entirely within the range where medications or lifestyle changes to lower cholesterol would be recommended. It is important to note that the ideal cholesterol level to minimize mortality risk may differ from traditional recommendations. This underlines the importance of individually tailored concepts for cholesterol management. It's important to note that some of these people with high cholesterol were healthy and others were very unhealthy. And the other factors that we identified as causes of heart disease were present in some of these people and not in others. Suppose we are looking at a specific population group. We want to find out how cholesterol affects mortality. To analyze the results in more detail, we remove all people with abdominal obesity from the group. We know that abdominal obesity is a risk factor for heart disease. We also exclude people with high blood pressure, high fasting blood sugar, high triglycerides, and low HDL levels, as these are also risk factors. Now, we have a population in which we can isolate the influence of cholesterol. We also consider people with high insulin levels. This allows us to examine in more detail whether cholesterol is actually a causative factor in deaths. It could be that these corrections would make the curve look almost flat. Perhaps total cholesterol levels at 500, 600, 700 milligrams per deciliter would rise for other reasons. But the majority of people with cholesterol levels in the 300 to 400 milligrams per deciliter range, if we could correct this through a healthy lifestyle, would not be at increased risk from cholesterol. I'm not suggesting that a total cholesterol level of 350 milligrams per deciliter is better than 250 milligrams per deciliter. And what I'm saying is that we shouldn't focus solely on the total cholesterol number. Instead, let's revisit the actual underlying causes we've discussed and understand why they contribute to heart disease risk, or at least play a role in it. When we face conditions like insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and poor metabolic health, the following happens in our bodies. LDL cholesterol, a low-density lipoprotein, undergoes a change. It is not that LDL cholesterol is bad in itself, but under the influence of these harmful factors, it can turn into a harmful form. Normally, LDL cholesterol is relatively large and is produced by our liver. It actually forms from even larger lipoproteins that shrink over time. If they are healthy, they fall into this larger range. However, when harmful factors are present in the body, these LDL particles become damaged and shrink. Inflammatory processes can damage the inner lining of your blood vessels, leaving small LDL particles unnoticed. This means they are not recycled properly and, due to their small size, end up in unwanted places and cause damage. To prevent this, consider making lifestyle changes such as eliminating or reducing sugar, processed foods, and damaged vegetable oils. Instead, choose a high-quality diet that includes vegetables, healthy meats, fish, nuts, fruits, and eggs, as long as they are well tolerated. For vegans, of course, animal products are omitted. Protein requirements can be met with peas, kidney beans, lentils, and soybeans. Micronutrients such as vitamin B12, and omega-3 fatty acids can be consumed through dietary supplements. Combine this with intermittent fasting, limiting food intake to specific time windows rather than snacking throughout the day. Also, incorporate high-quality fats like extra virgin olive oil and coconut oil, which provide stable saturated and healthy unsaturated fatty acids. In order to lead a healthy life, it is essential to integrate regular exercise into your everyday life. A balanced diet alone is not enough. Physical activity is also crucial for well-being. It is recommended to complete at least 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week, during which the breathing speeds up slightly. This can be achieved through everyday activities such as walking, gardening, or light cycling, which not only promote mobility, but also improve the health and performance of the cardiovascular system and lungs. Regular endurance training, which is also recommended for 150 minutes per week, can reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. If you like it more intense, you can achieve similar effects with 75 minutes of intensive training per week. Strength training, recommended 3 to 4 times per week, is important not only for building muscle, but also for maintaining muscle mass. Shorter, high-intensity training sessions can be just as effective as longer, moderate ones. When we then measure the sizes of these small LDL particles before and after the switch, we find that it goes the other way. By making these lifestyle changes, you reduce inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance, and now the body can begin to slowly excrete and cleanse these small damaged LDL particles. And as the body produces new and healthy particles, the proportion of these small particles becomes smaller and smaller. Of course, one wonders whether such lifestyle changes always work like this. The answer is no. Nothing works 100% of the time. Still, it might be worth it if more than 2/3 of people experience dramatic improvements on the first try. Some may need to experiment a bit more and find out what they are particularly sensitive to, whether an autoimmune disease is present, or whether other factors cause inflammation before they can achieve similar results. By implementing changes and monitoring blood counts, we can often achieve 98 to 99% improvement. This does not necessarily imply complete remission or the complete absence of symptoms, but in many cases it represents a significant improvement over the previous state. Unfortunately, there is a small segment of 1 to 2% of the population who, despite all efforts, do not have the desired results makes progress. Various genetic factors can contribute to the fact that, despite our best efforts, the improvements are not that significant. But even in these cases, progress can be seen, which supports the statement that investing in lifestyle is always worthwhile. The shocking truth about eggs and heart disease is that we've actually been told a lot. For decades, we have focused on the wrong aspects of nutrition, and fat has been unfairly demonized. It's time to set things straight. Because it's not about total cholesterol, it's not about food cholesterol, it's not about saturated fats or how many eggs you eat. It's about metabolic health and all the factors that contribute to it, like insulin toxicity, gut health, and the list goes on and on. That's why we need to understand more about how the body works and how the world has changed, because the world has changed more in the last 50 years than in the previous 50,000 years. And we need to understand how that affects us so that we don't just go like lambs to the slaughter. The solution is to learn what real food is and eat that. This also includes eggs, which means, unless you want to be vegan, as many as you like. Make sure you get good quality eggs, pastured eggs, and eat both the yolk and the white, unless you have determined that you are sensitive or allergic to eggs, because then they cause inflammation and then they are bad for you. Everyone is different. Learn what works for you, but understand it from the mechanics and physiology. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and turn on all notifications so you never miss another episode from us. And as always, we wish everyone a long, healthy, and happy life. See you next time.